Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Lysam coming to you with my amazing co host, TJ Matton, and we're evolving women. I'm evolving, you're evolving, we're all evolving, and we're here to help each other evolve. So, our intention is to fill the world with uplifting messages, new perspectives, tools, resources, wellness ideas, mindset options, changing our self-belief and our limiting beliefs. And we're here to give you permission to be your best self and live your best life. So welcome to Evolving Women. And TJ, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Hello. I'm really glad to get to be here with you.
So here we go. We're going to dive right in with TJ, who is the Chief Play Officer at the Playful Revolution. That sounds so much fun. I love just the title in and of itself. So I'm guessing we're going to have a conversation around play and being playful and just bringing more of that into our life. So I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us, TJ. So I'm going to let
Yeah.
you get started right off the bat.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. I love the title of your work here, Evolving Women. I think that for me, I've been a trauma therapist for 10 years and recently opened the Playful Revolution in 2023. Because I do see play as the practice and the gateway to evolving, right? That
Mm.
play is how we test things out and are figuring out how to like be the next version, right? Um, it is contingency testing, it's risk taking, it is the practice of evolving. And so I think that doing play education helps people figure out like what is the most fun way for me to evolve. Like that is what play is like how can I make this practice and this living and this experience of evolving enjoyable? How can I stay engaged in it? Um, so um, to people watching, I requested to actually interview Teresa a little bit today because I've been doing play education for a long time. And one of the things I recognize is that we have a very, very difficult time as adults in America understanding what play actually is.
Yes.
And there's a ton of reasons about that we can talk a little bit about later. But I wanted to kind of interview Teresa so that people can understand like what it means for us to start to learn about our own play history again. And a couple of things before we dive into my questions for Teresa today is that play is a primal drive. It is part of our mammalian system. It is similar to hunger and thirst and sleep, where if we deprive it, it will like lash out within the system. It is
Mm.
homeostatically regulated, which again, it's hunger, thirst, and sleep, where it is a primal,
Mm.
like biological drive and need in the body. And so humans are always either already playing or they are symptomatically seeking play out.
Mm.
And so this is where I really love to help adults understand like play is a part of your personality. It kind of is your personality. It's our strengths. It's how we see, think, and orient to the world. And helping people understand how they play can help reorient them to the world itself and to their world and their being.
Mm.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about play, and I'm going to help put some language to how you think about play and see what it might elicit in like a new way of understanding yourself. Um, and just kind of see where like what sparks fly for you as we talk about like what play actually means to you.
All right.
So
Can I just give you some of my thoughts on what
yeah,
you just spoke
of
about?
course.
Oh my God. I love everything you've said. There's so many juicy gems in there. First of all, I love that you reference play education. I've never heard those put together before because we think of education as serious,
Yeah.
and it's a learning thing that we have to really focus on. And you're putting like a fun, playful word together with a serious word. So that in and of
Mhm.
itself is pretty awesome. And I love that you refer to play as a primal drive. It's like a biological need, man. I have never thought about that before. For
Yeah.
me, it is because I love to be playful and play, but to know and understand that we are wired that way gives us a whole new perspective and a new respect for
Yes.
being playful
Yes.
and inviting that energy into us.
Yeah.
So when you said that when we don't get that and we deprive ourselves of that sense of play, it lashes out
Yeah.
and probably in ways that we see happening around us and we don't realize that that is our play trying to escape.
Express
And
itself.
yeah, that's just, oh, that is an amazing way of thinking about that.
Yeah.
Something I never have thought of. So thank you for bringing that all to our attention. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. So yeah, let's go ahead and dig in and see where
Yeah.
this
So the
goes.
first thing I think to ask about is like when you personally think about play, like how would you define it? Like what comes to mind? Um, yeah, like how would you
Like
on a language?
this.
Okay. So what about this feels playful for you?
It just makes me feel like I don't have to be serious and it's just time to be fun. And, I know people are looking at me like, oh my God, but it just makes me feel like I can just kind of be more uninhibited and like, oh, it's time to
Mm-hmm.
have fun.
Mm-hmm. For you, like, do you how often do you seek that like kind of feeling out?
Um, well, frequently, because I am a playful person, I believe by nature. But even with that being said, I don't let it out as frequently as I have in the past or that I would like to. So even coming from a playful personality right from the get-go, I'm still not using it to its fullness and its advantage and allowing it to really be leveraged in my life. So
Yeah.
this is for like my creativity time. I've kind of connected this with time when I'm want to get creative. It's just like, how when you were in school and they said, let's put on our thinking cap. Well, maybe that's
Yeah.
before your time, but anyway, like this
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of this. That's my creativity playful hat or whatever this is, headband.
Do you wear this when you like, do you roll into this? Like, do you put this on in your own practice?
Once in a
Like,
while, but really not a whole lot. But just looking at it sitting there, I'm like, oh, I should go, put that on and do something.
yeah.
But I am a laughter yoga facilitator. I've done that a lot in the past, not so much now. But this was part of my repertoire of little head ornaments that I always distributed to everybody. So I have a whole bunch of this stuff.
Yeah.
But it kind of changed people's moods and attitude when they put something on their head. It was kind of
Yeah.
goofy.
I mean,
They
that's like Halloween is my favorite like holiday because I think when people put costumes on, they like liberate a part of themselves, right? Like we
exactly,
get
for
like it's
sure.
when we put a mask on, we kind of unmask
That is so
one
true.
mask. It's when we put one mask on, we unmask another.
Yeah, isn't that
And so like in
interesting?
some way when you put this mask on, you are bringing forward like a more whimsical part of you, like one
Yes.
that is not so serious, is like isn't thinking quite so hard, is willing to kind of like let go a little bit, um,
Yes.
be a little silly, be a little stupid.
Yep.
Um,
Kind of giving myself that permission.
yeah.
hmm
When you don't have it on, like, let me see how to language this. Like, when you don't have it on, what is on? Like, who are you?
The
Because
adult,
serious, so yeah, okay, okay,
the adult version, that needs to be serious and be responsible and that kind of stuff.
okay. Is there anything about being an adult that you do find fun? Like when you think about being like, so there's adult as like an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also like adult as like when we're an adult, we get to be invested in certain things that we don't get to be in a way. And so when you think about like what you get to be invested in as an adult, like where do you lose yourself?
In terms of that playfulness?
No.
No. Okay. I
Mm-mm.
guess I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's okay. Where do you find yourself, like just in general, where do you lose yourself in life? Like, are you, um, yeah, where do you find yourself like kind of getting lost in time, lost in space? Like, where do you get to feel invested in something? Um, or like a sense of wandering in like mind or in body, like curiosity, exploration?
Do you mean like in the zone?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the zone, when I'm walking, which is like a meditative practice for me, or when I am in creation mode, like when I do this little Zentangle practice, and again, not as often as I'd like to, where I just sit there and, work on this little design. And it's all about the process. It's not about the outcome. And so, yeah, time just kind of goes, I don't know where when I'm doing that. But again, it's very infrequent that I do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then playing with my grandkids, that time seems to have no meaning when that's happening. So,
Yeah. When you're in your walking, what is that like?
um, I'm doing a couple of different things.
Yeah.
I'm either observing what's happening around me. So I'm in the moment, listening to the birds, trying to zero in on details because I take the same routes all the time. So trying to focus on other things other than the big picture. Or I'm listening to things in my ears. So I'm listening to um, webinars that I've, had recorded, whatever. So I'm doing one of two things. Well,
Hmm.
kind of both, because when I'm listening, I'm still visually observing the landscape around me, but not
Yeah.
as intently.
Yeah. And so one of the things that, a couple of things that are kind of coming up for me as we talk a little bit about like what it means to play and how we understand it is that we have a very culturally narrow definition of play, that it is always whimsical, that it is always extroverted, that it is always silly.
Mm,
And so there's a part of you that feels like it's only playing when it's in this non-serious,
mm-hmm.
fun, uninhibited place. And this is part of like how we have washed play away culturally. Is that when we narrowly define it in this whimsical way, it makes it very difficult for adults to embrace it because we
Mm,
have been pushed into productivity mindsets
yeah.
from a
Yeah.
very early age,
Yes.
right? So like you only get permission, you only get permission to be this like in a narrow corner of your
Yes.
life.
Exactly. In these
And
pockets of time.
yes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it has to be very clearly defined by you as well, right? Like narrow pockets, and then like you turn off, you turn on, you turn off, right?
Yes.
Like it's more like a light
Exactly.
switch versus like
Yes.
what we want to work with is like keeping play almost like a dimmer switch,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like it turns up in certain areas and
Yes.
turns down in certain areas and turns up and turns down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the things that is super, super common for us as adults is that we have a very narrow understanding of play because what we understand play to be is like extroverted and creative and laughter filled.
Yeah.
And these are actually like um, more side effects of being playful than they are play itself. Right.
Wow.
So you don't
Hmm.
like laughter is a side effect of being interested in something, being engaged in something. Creativity is a side effect of being curious about something, right? And so it's not, and so in some ways, like putting this, like putting this mask and this role on, like is a gateway for you into like a role that is needing a little bit more, like a wider, like a little bit wider space, like how I can bring creativity into more spaces. How do I bring like a lighter feeling to life in more spaces? Because then when we shift to adulthood, it's like boom.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yes.
it feels like it's this light on, like this on and off light. But there are these areas of adulthood that are playful in a serious way. And so we're going to talk about like kind of a little bit about what language I hear from you about like how you might consider like the land of adulting a little bit more playful, right? And so one of the things I think I am aware of is that there's a lot of enjoyment of being focused in a way. Like you like focused creativity time, like it feels nice to have it compartmentalized. With walking, there seems to be like kind of a clear enjoyment of a focus. But it's not like narrow focus. It is, but it's still focused. It's observational focused, right? So there's a detail-oriented part of you that is continuing to observe new things so that it stays interesting. Because if you're taking the same walking course all the time, it sounds like. So like every day you're challenging yourself to stay engaged.
Yes.
Right. And so like this, the practice of staying engaged in something is your play, right? Like play is how can I enjoy my engagement? How can I engage in this with enjoyment? And so for you, the way that you are constantly learning is a form of play, right? It's depth play, it's exploratory play, it's visual play. But what I like kind of language this a lot as like is exploratory play, where you both do depth play, like let me get into a topic, and exploratory play, let me look around me, right? Like let my eyes see. So as an explorer, we tend to enjoy losing ourselves both in depth from like an intellectual stimulation and curiosity, as well as like an expansive way, through like noticing and curiosity. And this is a place where you, like for you, whimsicality kind of lives up here. Let me backtrack that last sentence because I don't know if that actually feels right. But somehow like whimsicality doesn't get to be a part of your depth play. Like it's something that turns on and off, versus like the depth play of like the intellectual, of that intellectualness, like the curiosity, the learning, like that gets to be on a lot more.
Yes.
But doesn't get seen as play either.
That's
And so
true.
the question is like why, like what hinders us, what hinders you in your body from like acknowledging that you deeply enjoy that and that it is regenerative on your being? So like what within you is hesitant to call that play?
That's very interesting. Yeah, again, lots of good points in there that we could pick apart. But that is so interesting that you referred to the depth of my learning, because I am a high learner. Learning energizes me.
Yeah.
And it is something that I do find fun if I really think about it. And as you are referencing that, yeah, it is fun for me. And I don't acknowledge that it's fun, even though I enjoy it and I gravitate towards that. If I could spend my whole entire day just learning, and that's it, then I would be perfectly happy the rest of my life. So that is so interesting that is, we want to acknowledge that, if I'm understanding you correctly, acknowledge that is a form of fun for us. So
Yeah.
having an awareness and exploring, well, what does energize me? What does light me up and I enjoy it? Is that a version of fun for me?
Mm-hmm. And like when you're learning, one of the things to be able to acknowledge is like when when you're in a learning environment is you're deeply engaged. And like, you said, like when I think about it, it is fun, right? Which means like there's a pattern towards engagement,
Right.
but not necessarily a pattern towards enjoyment in a way, right? Like that fun feels more like thinking about it, it feels more engaged than it does like enjoyment, which is like a felt thing.
Hmm.
And so, like, is there a way to turn, and also like kind of curious, like what it would mean for you to learn whimsically? Like, when was the last time you learned about something you didn't really care about
Mm-hmm.
because you enjoyed, because you enjoy learning?
Hmm.
And so, like, in some ways, part of where we begin to challenge play, like the evolution of play, right? As we talk about evolving our play,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that we, again, as a capitalistic, productivity focused society, we think, and I am on this boat too. Like if I go to a training, which I love learning, if I go to a training, I feel like I have to figure out how to integrate that. How do I learn about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And which in some ways puts pressure on the learning environment. Um, where we can go and just enjoy learning about something and like not worry about when we're going to use it,
Mm-hmm.
not feel like the pressure to make something of it,
Mm-hmm. To apply
right?
it or
To
to,
apply it,
yes. Yeah.
right? That like
Mm-hmm.
we can go and learn and just be engaged and enjoy it because like why not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Because it's
so
fun.
right.
Yeah.
And so this is part of kind of like a little bit of how we begin to lose play is that we think we have to do things with a purpose
Hmm.
in a way. And this is something that kind of I think is interesting about the way you talk, like not you specifically, but I think is very, very common in adulting is that we don't always have permission to enjoy the things that we find very engaging without engaging in them for a purpose.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so and so then it feels like we have to kind of have this light on, light off switch where
Mm-hmm.
like, this is where I have fun and this is where I feel engaged versus them kind of being in this more of a dimmer switch of where might you uh, give the body, how might you give the body a little bit more permission to have fun in your learning experiences, to enjoy your learning experiences, to allow the learning to feel whimsical um, and uninhibited. How you might let go of your expectations as a student to use the knowledge and rather just like have fun, like in the experience of it, um, which shows up a little bit more like in your walking, right? Where like there's a little bit of a blend of that seriousness and whimsicality as you are an observer, right? Like you take your observation practices very seriously, but they sound fun,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, what can I notice?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I think this is, so I one just kind of want to pause and thank you for like sharing a little bit about um, the way you think and operate. I think even from our first conversation, it's very clear to me how much you love learning and connecting and engaging. In our first conversation, you gave me tons of names of people, and this is a part of your observation play. It's like, who else is doing these sorts of things, right? You're
Yep.
like
Yep.
you're a weaver in this observing
Mm.
way.
Mm.
Um, and it brings you a lot of like it clearly brings you a lot of joy to kind of stay
Mm-hmm.
in this discovery mindset.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and somehow isn't um so, like and somehow there's not like permission to get as much enjoyment out of as I think you could if we were to call it play.
And what I'm hearing is maybe as adults, because a person like you, from your perspective, giving ourselves permission to be aware of these little points in our day that are pleasurable for us. And can
Yeah.
we reframe them? Oh, that was fun for me. Yeah. How can I amplify that more
Yeah.
or carry that more into this next thing that I want to do or get to do?
Yeah.
So that awareness from this new perspective that you're sharing with us could really lead to more enjoyment and fun and playfulness, even if it's on a deeper, serious level. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And because play is really, and I think I sit a lot with the word serious with people because culturally, again, we have this very narrow vision of like play being
Mm-hmm.
like extroverted, um, SNL kind of characters. And versus the fact that we like science is based off of play, right? Every scientist has been testing theories. It's contingency testing. It's like, oh, it didn't work this way. Let's try it this
Mm-hmm.
way. Oh, it didn't work that way. Oh,
Mm.
but this worked this
Wow.
way, right? Like
That is
every
a,
scientist is a player.
I never would have thought of that neither. I love that though.
As a
Thank
therapist,
you.
I think like every therapist needs to be like I think and I hope at the end of my life that like there's a legacy that every therapist considers themselves like an excellent play buddy because like we are
Mm-hmm.
restoring, right? Like, oh, that version of your draft isn't like this draft that you're living in, like something's not right about this version of your story. Like
Mm-hmm.
what's like and helping my clients get that main character energy. Like what needs to shift in
Mm.
like the world? And is it main character energy that needs to shift? Is it rewriting, like noticing the scene a little differently? Do they need a sidekick? Like how would you restore this moment in a way? And again, like when we are in when we have language that anchors us into our play, it makes the act of living more fun because um, one of the things that I think play teaches us is it lets us sit in the openness of the what if, right? That being alive is very scary because we know we're not in as much control as we would like to be in
True.
the
Very true.
world. And we love and crave certainty and security and we need
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot get that from external circumstances. And so becoming skilled as a player is what lets us feel more trusting of living in this uncertain world that we're in, that like towers are going to
Mm.
fall, bridges are going to, both in real life and in play, right? Like we know as children that if we build to something too far, it's going to fall. And that becomes part of the process of like welcoming things falling apart because we still can remain in our play body and let that be a part of the play process rather than taking us out of our process. But in
Wow.
order to not take ourselves out of the process, like to stay in our story, we really do need to be anchored in like what our play strengths are. Like, how does my body welcome things falling apart as part of the story?
Wow.
And
Whew.
and so, you mentioned something about amplifying, and play is a two-part practice. It's engagement and enjoyment. And it's kind of continuing to amplify one or the other, right? Like, how can I play with being a little bit less engaged in my learning and a little bit more enjoyable in my learning, right? Like, or can I stay this engaged? But what would it mean to turn up the enjoyment aspect? Like to give myself permission to notice what I'm enjoying the most. Like, how do I notice enjoyment? How do I amplify that in my practices of engagement? And so play is really about like where noticing from a more embodied place what engagement feels like in a nourishing, positive, choice, self-driven way, and what enjoyment feels like um
Wow.
in
And I
in
just
like a
want
practice of non-judgment.
of ourselves. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the situation and whatever. Um, when you say embody, I just want to make sure our listeners, our viewers understands, because it took me a long time to figure out what the heck does that even
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
embodiment, from my understanding, is just where we're feeling it, like how our body is receiving that and responding. So instead of it being up here, we're noticing what's happening in our body.
Yeah.
And that took me a really long time because I was so disconnected
Yeah.
from the body part.
Yeah. I mean, even when, we circle back, like, you talked about like, yeah, when I think about it, I am
Yep.
enjoying it.
Yep. Yep.
Right. And so there's a thought first way of functioning in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of why we don't value play, because play is not a initial, like, it is a felt experience. Like, you cannot tell from the outside whether somebody is playing. That you can only tell because of your inside experience.
Wow.
So
That is so amazing to think of. There I go again. Think about it
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Or see
And
it
it's
from that
okay to think
perspective.
about it like that, because I think thinking is the gateway in. Like, it's how our culture functions, like in this language first, in a language first, like get a grip on it sort of way. Like, this is how we've all been trained
Yeah. Yeah.
to function, right? And this is part of why we've watered down play, language wise, experience wise, values wise. Is because it's not something we can get a grip on. It doesn't feel as tangible as our culture wants
Right. Right.
us to function as in the world.
Oh my gosh. So much here. So much.
It's a
So many
lot.
new ways of thinking and so many insights I'm having.
Yeah.
And like you said,
It's a
putting
lot.
language around it, around
Yeah.
these ideas. So, what I'm going to suggest, if it's okay with you,
Yeah.
why don't we wrap up this particular episode and we're going to go into part two? Would that be okay with you?
Yeah. What do you want to do in part two?
We'll just continue the conversation
Okay.
so that people can take a break, because this is a lot. This is a
Yeah.
lot to process. So what we'll do for our viewers is we'll take we'll stop here. We'll finish this episode. And I know they're going to want to stay tuned for episode 2 or part 2 of our conversation with TJ Matton. So stick around, come back for the next episode, look for the next episode. And we're going to continue this conversation on play. I know this has given you some new perspectives and some new ways of looking at play and a new awareness that maybe you can apply to your own life, and just start to notice little moments in your day when you are feeling a sense of enjoyment. And can you label that as play? If even that's a good way of saying it. Label something as play or allow it to be playful. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. And TJ, thank you so much. And we're going to continue this conversation. So make sure you come back.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.